Blackstone Energy is a management firm that guides large businesses, municipalities, and hospitals towards net zero consumption and serves to deliver purposeful change. Over the years, Ryan has grown Blackstone Energy tenfold from its original size and manages energy portfolios across North America, the Caribbean, with a head office in Toronto. Ryan is part of many committees and councils and was recently named Smartpreneur of the Year at the Ontario Sustainable Energy Association's Powering Prosperity Awards. This is an honor that recognizes exceptional entrepreneurial leadership and with a vision in the field of sustainable energy. On top of this award, Blackstone was recently named the winner of the 2020 Canadian Business Excellence Awards, and it's its third consecutive year achieving this honor. So without further ado, I would like to welcome and thank you for Ryan for joining us today.
All right, we're off to a good start. I see the fonts here are out of sync. We've got all these funny proprietary fonts, so I apologize to everyone in the audience here because stuff will fall off the page, and for anybody online, well, I'll make sure to give you guys a good copy of this later so it all makes sense and is legible. So thank you for inviting me today. This is an honor for us as well, an honor for me to come and present what it is that we're doing and maybe some practical things that we're seeing in the marketplace as it relates to sustainability and the carbon economy. So I hope you find this interesting. There's only 55 slides, but I will go through them at rapid pace, almost like a video. So 4 things I just want to talk about a little bit about Blackstone. I brought Alicia from our office as well too. She's a recent grad, not from Rock, but just a recent grad working at our company, sort of trying to understand what's going on in the energy world as well too. So I thought this would be a good forum for her to come and take a look and support. So proof that we're in the carbon economy, and then a little bit of the comparison between sustainability and carbon. I think those two unfortunately get interchanged quite a lot. There are some similarities, but there's a lot of differences as well too. And lastly, we'll talk about some examples and maybe some things for Brock to think about going forward. So we've got a lot of really amazing folks based out of Toronto, as it was mentioned. And these are economists, these are sustainability folks, these are engineers, these are financial folks, just a fantastic team. And this is our core team. And then when we get into very large projects, it'll sort of go up and down depending on where the projects are and the type of work that we're doing as well too. And as it's mentioned, across Canada, in North America, and this other place called the Caribbean, may have heard of it before. It's a fun place to do work. So what is it, the work that we're doing? Ultimately, we're trying to help people manage their energy risk. And this is a really important thing going into the future here, because people have good intentions. They want to do the right thing as it relates to sustainability, but dollars come into play, into the fold, and a lot of times prohibit things from getting done. So we're lucky to deal with a lot of people, a lot of energy is being spent and being consumed. So we're in a really unique position to help influence and maybe even catalyze some of these thoughts and ideas and initiatives in order to help people move in the right direction. 3 categories: manage, conserve, and generate. I'll talk about all 3, but conserve and generate certainly seem to be the ones that come up more often than not. And you really do need all 3 to sort of make the right holistic approach to try to manage not only how much you use, but your costs associated with that too. A little bit of an idea, some of the folks that we deal with. So of course we got the Brock logo up there. We're lucky to work with Brock, other universities, colleges, airports, cement, commercial, retail, you name it. We've got a really good breadth of clients that I think helps our perspective and when we bring solutions to our clients. So where we're going with all this, 4 years ago, we took up this corporate vision. 4 years ago, when I introduced this to my team, they thought it was too bold, too crazy. But good visions are bold. And now when we post this, it doesn't seem as bold as it did, because there's many companies, including the country, who are setting 2030 and 2050 goals of even Canada wanting to be 100% net zero by 2050. That's a pretty big goal. So how do we get there? So we're trying to help people understand how to get there. I'll show you a little bit about that. So this whole thing about the carbon economy, this is kind of, we've been doing energy efficiency and sustainability work with clients really since 2009 is really when people started to ask about it. Incentives started to come in from the province and from the federal government. And people would only do it if there was an incentive. People would only do it if they had less than a 3-year payback. And a lot of these things that we're trying to change, you'd be lucky to get them under a 10-year payback. So therefore, they don't get done. So what changed, of course, is when the Paris Accord came about, is the whole world coming together to address carbon, to put a price on carbon so that there was a penalty if you were using and abusing and emitting too much. This is some of the scientific research that was collected leading up to COP21, the UN Climate Change Summit, and some of the information, the science-based information that the leaders of the world came together and said, we need to do something about this. This is not something that's happening in St. Catharines or Ontario or Canada or North America. This is a global thing. And I don't think I need to tell you that our weather is changing a little bit. We may not feel the brunt of it here protected in Ontario, but certainly in our work in the Caribbean, we see it on a regular basis. The catastrophe that's happening there, the lives that are getting negatively affected. And it is concerning. So as it relates to sustainability, we use this visual a lot of the times to talk about, to me, sustainability is about coexistence, and it's about harmony and living and not overusing sort of the resources that we've been given. But this is a real life example where you can visually see the damage that climate change is having on the acidity levels of our waters, let alone the water levels rising and affecting and displacing communities. Quick little stat, in China, I don't know if anybody's been to China before, but on the East Coast where Beijing, Shanghai, like all the major hubs are there, there's about 1 billion people on the coast, literally on the coast. So as water levels rise, how do you displace 1 billion people? China's done it in the past where they've just up and moved communities, but 1 billion people, 1 billion worth of infrastructure, you just don't do that overnight, let alone over decades. So it is real. It is. A lot of people have wondered, is China at the table? Is the U.S. at the table? We don't want to do this if everybody's not in, kind of thing. And that verdict is still out. And I think I read in the news yesterday that Trump is taking sort of the final steps of removing the U.S. from the Paris Accord, the Paris Agreement, which is unfortunate. So election in the U.S. couldn't come quicker. So, and why did this all happen? There's been a ton of studies to talk about what normal looks like, which doing nothing, what happens to our climate. And I was lucky enough to be at Paris when this happened, and the preceding COPs being a Canadian delegate to help in the talks there. And the one thing that kept coming up, the neat thing with COP, because the climate proceedings have been around for many years, what was unique about this one, not only did all the countries come together, but business was invited as well too. They recognized that this is just not a political matter. We need businesses to rally together, bring that common sense, bring that entrepreneurship to find solutions. So that was the first time they actually were willing to take feedback. The common thing that came out of this was everyone was so worried about their respective economies, but science is saying that you won't have an economy to worry about if we let this go too far. So that's the compelling reason why everyone came together to try to address this. And the UN continues to put out great studies with the world's best scientists on what's going on. When these reports come out, they're already 12 months old too. That's the other thing that people don't realize, is this is old news when the UN is again saying we are in a climate emergency here. So we're concerned, and that's why we took that bold vision up, because we know we're in a position to help our clients see how to get from A to Z. And it's not an easy journey, but I'll show you what we're doing to try to help get people there. So I'll maybe glaze over this. I think everybody understands here, being the program that you're in, that we are in a precarious position, and it is we need to do something to address this. Thankfully, this is Toronto on the left side there. You can see the Canadian flag there. On the right, that was New York, the climate march. So I was lucky enough to be at both of those. The one in New York was really cool because it was the first time that somebody other than business and politicians really stood up and was telling the community that enough is enough. We need to do something more. So there is quite a groundswell that's been happening. This is accelerating things, and hopefully our elected followers will pick up on what's getting put down here and start to accelerate some of the political change. Because if you hang out at the UN and you listen to the science, my takeaway was we need to be in a warlike state where the whole economy does a pivot and is focused on one thing and one thing only, and that is to defeat the enemy, who is climate change. I don't know. But we're not in that scenario at all. People are still in denial, and it's a little bit out of sight, out of mind. Unfortunately, that's what I was saying. Ontario, even with bad weather, we own coats, we have heaters, we have all these tools to help us sort of get through the troubled times. I wanted to take you back for a quick second because I find this stuff interesting. Hopefully you do too. This is back 1881, so not too long ago. But this came out in Vanity Fair as a cheeky kind of cartoon where the whales are celebrating finding oil in the ground. Because up until then, your heating and your lighting was all whale blubber. As crazy as that. I feel funny even saying that. But that is a reality. And out of this came a pretty interesting fellow who started a company, Rockefeller, who started Standard Oil. This company hasn't been around for eons, but you've probably heard of it, and the logo kind of looks familiar. Well, what happened was the US government got quite anxious about how much power and money this company, this individual was making, that they forced him to disband his company. Could you imagine that if the US government said, Facebook, we actually don't like what you're doing. You need to break yourself apart. We want you to disassemble and go away. And that's kind of what had happened back then. This is how revolutionary oil was. Can anyone guess what the evolution of that breakup, which company sort of took on the face of Standard Oil? Anybody want to take a guess? Anybody? Bueller? Anybody? The answer is all of these companies came out of Standard Oil. So none of these are small. ExxonMobil continues to be in the top 10 of the most valuable companies in the last 30 years, even currently. But yeah, they're all enormous companies. So this kind of gives you an appreciation for the power that the Rockefeller family had way back when. So my purpose of bringing this up is we talked about the emotional and the scientific side of things. Now who is fueling the fire, pardon the pun, of investing in the fossil fuel companies? Well, historically, Rockefeller Fund has obviously been a big one there. The brothers had, I think it's nearly $1 billion sort of invested. This is the fund that they've got. And they took a really bold move. This was just shortly after the Paris Agreement to divest themselves of all their fossil fuel holdings. So on the heels of this, and they did this basically saying that our great-grandfather would have wanted us to do this. He was an innovator back then and wanted to do the right thing for society. Back then it was for maybe the whales, I don't know. That was one of the reasons why they elected to do this. But what this spurred is many other corporations looking at what's encouraging publicly traded companies to declare their cost of carbon and to publicly declare that. And what we're trying to get people to do is to actually declare that on their financial statements. So it's as serious as as a financial audit to also have your carbon liability layered in there. And one of the largest fund companies in the world, BlackRock, not Blackstone, BlackRock, we get mixed up sometimes, said just recently that the future of investing, if you don't have sustainability and a cost of carbon in your company's DNA, you don't have a future, certainly in their fund, or just a future in general. So this has gone. We've covered all gamuts of those that sort of need to be involved in this movement of sustainability in this carbon economy. So some of you may have seen this. This may even fall into your curriculum. This is what was really kind of established and cemented back in the Paris Agreement, certainly well socialized. And this is now the guide for business. When you look at poverty, hunger, quality education, gender equality, like these things were talked about before, but it was never part of somebody's DNA or their credo or anything like that. This is now the new norm. So if you weren't already enrolled in this program, I would encourage you to do so, because this is definitely the future. And the business community and other leaders are going to look to people that have got the right mindset, that understand why this exists, and actually understand the key components there. And number 13, the climate to action, is the one certainly that we end up focusing on it quite a bit. So we're still kind of talking about the difference between sustainability and the carbon economy. So sustainability, if people believe in these things, carbon, a price on carbon is kind of the catalyst to help projects happen. You've seen it in the financial community, where if you don't demonstrate these sustainability goals, your stocks are going to be affected. You're not going to attract the best talent that's out there. Could you imagine, and I have lots of people that work at the Shells and the BPs and the Suncors, fantastic companies. We still need them today. We need them to pivot. We need them to change. We need them to adapt. We don't need them to immediately stop what they're doing, because nobody will be able to drive home or come back to school because we won't have anything to go and fill up at the gas station for. But they're in the position, they're all, like I mentioned, Exxon's in the top 10 still. They have the ability to pivot and to make a change. Because right now, the folks that, I know 2 people that have left those big organizations, and 50% of the reason why they left is because they feel that they're not working for a company that's got the right purpose for the future, and that it's more of a burden and liability than it is inspiring people to sort of work on what it is that they do for a living. So this is really happening. But I mentioned that the dollars is a big part of it, and what I want to talk about is a little bit more about what's happening locally in carbon pricing, and then I'll talk about that balance between dollars and sustainability. So we have carbon pricing in Canada, and with Trudeau government getting elected back in, the carbon tax continues. Nobody likes a tax, but if you see how much we have to change, we have to prevent people from emitting profusely now. We also need to collect dollars to redeploy them into better use. That's the purpose. The thing that we're hopeful with, and we've seen so far, is normally when you think of a tax, you're paying something and it goes into the abyss of the government, and you don't know where the dollars are getting deployed. So the Trudeau government has done a good job of making sure that all those dollars come back to us. What I don't like is it actually comes back to us in our tax returns. So dollars come into my bank account, your bank account, your bank account. It doesn't go, in the cap and trade program, what was happening there was the provincial government was collecting dollars, and they created essentially a big green bank, and then people would submit applications on ideas, whether they were simple or really innovative ideas, and the government would give those dollars out to spur that kind of innovation, so that it was getting put to practical use. Now all that's happening is corporations are getting penalized from emitting too much. So that's good. That's step one. But step two, unfortunately, it's going into our genes. That's fine. It's up to us now to make the right decisions. So, and I think that will. I'm optimistic that will be the case, and we'll do the right thing. But let me flip over to here. So, interesting thought there. Right now, the cost of carbon is found in your natural gas bill and at the pumps. Those are the only 2 places that it's being collected. And this is the current futures curve, the dotted line. The solid one, of course, is the actual settlements that we saw for natural gas commodity. The blue line is the estimate of what the cost of carbon will be. When you look at today, it's $20 a ton. It was supposed to be 30, but the Trudeau government lightened that up going into the election. But it's going to go to 50. So that is a huge jump. But what we're trying to show people, and this visual actually doesn't do it, I can tell right now, because it didn't click in. If we go back, this is sort of the tail end of 2016 is where this starts. If you go back another 5 years, we have prices going up above $8 and almost hitting $14. So in perspective, to have this increase, it's actually not that bad. business survived at $10 a GJ, $12 a GJ in the past. So this is doable. It's not the end of the world, but of course the opposition will tell you that it is the end of the world. But so this is palatable, and it's certainly palatable if you know that there's an emergency. And I just think that people aren't, because we're not feeling it day in and day out that the emergency isn't there. This is a cool little stat coming hot off the election on where we think policy is going to go. So this is around reductions in emissions. So you can see the Green Party obviously wants to get it to an aggressive but pretty amazing emissions level if we could do it. This is the 511 is the federal target right now, but you can see the solid blue line there, or solid red line is still a little too conservative for where we actually need to be. But we believe that because the government's going to need to get buy-in, certainly from the NDP and also from the Green Party, that we're hopefully going to, any policy that gets developed is going to pull it a little bit further south there, and we'll have a better chance with even with the minority government of getting things pushed forward. So the other thing besides science, besides the world governments coming together, and besides the children of the world coming together, the other thing that's making this possible is what's happening with the electricity market. Normally when people talk about energy, they mean electricity. They don't mean natural gas or water or any of these other things that are included in the sustainability sort of makeup. But this is a picture of sort of a typical grid where at the top you've got your major assets, your nuke, your hydro, some wind there, creating electricity and distributing it one direction out to the commercial, universities, homes. What we're dealing with right now is this distributed energy resources. That's what the DER stands for there, where you've got now, because thanks to Moore's law, we've got cheaper, better, faster technology, solar, battery, wind, where it's actually affordable for somebody to buy their own generation and either support themselves, sort of almost even island themselves if they wanted to, or they can sell back to the grid and they can make money. This is that prosumer kind of analogy. And this is quite compelling. This economies of scale. Solar, this is in Egypt. This is a pretty massive $4 billion project, largest of its kind. Really cheap power. Really, really cheap power. 2 cents right now at your home, you're probably paying about 15 cents on average. So massive delta there. And it all has to do with this little analogy here. So the fonts, again, didn't come out too well, but what this is trying to demonstrate is the energy of the future is a technology. It's not a fossil fuel. It's not something that you pull out of the ground. It's not even the wind or the sun, theoretically. It's a technology. And the purple curve there is the commodity. So trying to find these resources is getting tougher. It's getting, it's dirty work. It's volatile because trying to extract these things in the Gulf of Mexico, the weather is a big factor on how you produce these resources. So that cost over time for commodities is only going to go, it's going to be a rocky road, and it's only going to get more expensive, especially with the cost of carbon on it. Technology is getting cheaper, better, faster. So what's interesting for communities and utilities and governments to think about is we can be investing in a technology and we can get some certainty. It's not going to be a rocky road. we can bank on it, because if we put in solar panels, the cost is going to be the same for 20 years. It's not going to do anything, right? Versus the volatile or the volatility of the natural gas of it. It's part of what we do with the university right now, is we help manage the commodity risk, that volatility. So instead of us being worried about that taking away from our job, we're seeing the reality of things here and helping our clients push through to that kind of a mindset and reality. So I put this slide up instead of solar because I think most people know the prices for solar has collapsed. It's just plummeted over the years. Batteries, lithium-ion batteries, is about 7 years behind solar, but it is still plummeting. And this one from Bloomberg New Energy was a good one, a recent one, because they actually pulled it out to 2030. And this is like free. You know, so if you're able to take the intermittency out of solar and wind and store it and use it, deploy it when you need it, now you've got a great balancing effect here in wherever you are, even if it's not that sunny or windy where you are. You can, even if you're drawing on assets from hydro or nuke, right now, it is cheaper in the evening than it is in the daytime from an electricity price. So if you can charge overnight and deploy during the day, there's an economic model there. So, and it's getting progressively better because of how far prices are falling. So I've said a lot of stuff, a lot of theory, a lot of interesting things. Now, where does the rubber hit the road? So we get engaged with clients to help them create a bit of a roadmap. So people want to understand, what is it going to take for my campus or my building or my corporation to go net zero? Where are my big uses of and emissions? You can see here, and this is a university. I blocked out which university it is. It's not Brock's. But you can see here the biggest contributor is the purple, which is natural gas. So, and Scott can attest to, Mary can attest to, you know, there's not enough technology out there to eliminate natural gas from how the buildings are getting heated. But it's going to change. Technology will change. Policy will change. Cost of carbon will change. All these things will change. So what we're trying to do is to map out, you know, here's your targets, whether you set them at 2030 or 2050 or somewhere in between. What do you need to do along the time horizon there? We've taken this sort of snapshot, once a year kind of look, and we've automated it into a dashboard, and we've made it essentially real time or almost on demand. And why this is important, we call it a greenhouse gas roadmap. Why this is important is because if you want to pitch to the C-suite of the university that we need to electrify the facilities, we need to get rid of our natural gas boiler, and we need to bring in an electric one, and all these kind of things, they're going to say, okay, great. You know, well, what's the economics look after that? What's the payback? What's the operating cost? And if you tell them, they're going to say, well, you're crazy, because that doesn't work, because electrifying is more expensive. So you do need, we're trying to appeal to all the business leaders to take on the desire to at least want to understand what it'll take to electrify. And it's not, there's no silver bullet, it's not an easy road, but we want to have something that's a little more dynamic than a snapshot of your carbon footprint in November 2019 when you're looking out 2030 and 2050. So this is the analogy that we've kind of used here is kind of like a Waze app. Everybody has Waze, I'm sure, on their phone. If you don't, I'll show you afterwards. But the neat thing with that kind of a technology is you plug in your destination, it'll tell you how long it's going to take and what route to take. But along the way, it didn't happen today, but along the way, it'll give you a different route if there's a problem, if there's an accident, if there's police, if you don't want to take tolls, all this kind of stuff. So we look at this journey as it has to be dynamic because technology is changing so rapidly, because policies are trying to catch up, because the cost of carbon, because your business is changing, that it needs to be that dynamic. It needs to be like a Waze app. And as soon as you turn it off, you still might know where your destination is. You still might know where your goals are, but now you're blind. And you can't appreciate the new technology and everything. So what we've concluded in dealing with all the C-suite folks is they need to know what the number is in order to work backwards. If they understand what it'll take, they know it's not there's no silver bullet, but at least if they've got some perspective, and along the way they know that perspective is getting updated, it at least helps bridge the gap from somebody saying no and not addressing things and going with the least cost sort of alternative in how you build your buildings really as well too. So this isn't live, but this is kind of what the dashboard looks like, and it populates everything that has a pulse on your building, everything that emits, anything in your facility, and it can look at all the different scopes, so scope 1, 2, and 3. And 3 is sort of the outlier there because that, I look at all the cars out in the parking lot there, that is scope 3. So students coming back and forth, staff coming back and forth, professors flying to Paris to do a conference, that is all part of scope 3. It's a pretty scary looking thing. So, so it includes all that stuff. You can toggle things on and off to see, if we buy this electric boiler, if we do this or we do that, how can we continue to reduce our outlook and our footprint along the way here? What sort of decisions are we making with the long game in mind? Another neat thing that's come out, so I'm involved in a group, it's the X Prize Foundation, charitable organization based out in California, started by a guy, Peter Diamandis, who wanted to fly into outer space. And he was sort of disgruntled that space was controlled by government, and he wanted to privatize it. So he did. I want to say it was 15 years ago, but it might be a little bit longer, probably a little bit longer. So he created a prize, a $20 million prize for the first group to come to him with that met his requirements on flying up into space with humans, landing, and then flying back up in space again within a two-day period of time. And they basically crowdsourced the market, the whole world. So this was a real neat example of the first crowdsourcing that was done. And they were successful. This kickstarted Virgin Galactica and Elon Musk's venture of going into outer space and everything that you see going on now. So that prize was sort of the catalyst to what the organization's doing now. What the organization's trying to do is to tackle subjects that government or business are not tackling already, and trying to source the world to solve problems. So the one that I'm currently involved with is the removal of carbon dioxide from the air. Because if you read deep into the scientific findings, to reduce, to conserve, to be sustainable is great, but it's actually not enough. It's not enough to bend the curve on the trajectory that we're going right now. So removal has to be part of the picture. And this isn't just sticking something in the ground either. This is trying to be more innovative on that. So this just kicked off. So all we have is a lot of interest, but no solutions right now. The background picture there is Barbados. In Barbados, we're doing an ag solar development. It's a 4 megawatt ground mount facility. And the reason why I highlight it, we're really proud of it. It's not complete yet, but there's always this struggle between, if I'm going to use all this land to put all this solar down, I'm taking away from farming. And part of sustainability is making sure you have food too, and make sure you don't have to go too far to get your food. So this is a really cool combination of looking at farming and animal grazing and raising of animals interwoven with solar PV too. And this is on an island that wants to be 100% renewable by 2030. Well, how do you do that other than covering literally every square inch with solar, when they're also very concerned about all the preservatives in the food that they import because they don't generate enough their own local food. So stuff is happening. People are being pretty innovative there. This is, I think, the last one I've got, and this is the one for you guys to sink your teeth into. So there it is. See, it's totally skewed, but the future of transportation. So everyone knows who Tesla is and sort of what an electric vehicle is. I'm preaching to the choir here a little bit, but we're looking at is the future of energy. And the reason why is because if we were to take this won't link. If we were to take, I guess the building pretty good, didn't I? So this is the parking lot. Oh no, it's not the parking lot. Oh, it is. Is it the parking lot? Yeah. Yeah. If we were to take a square footage like what you see out there and try to put in a parking lot, elevated, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5-story parking lot, you got a lot of capacity there. And we had to park way over there today. It was not a far walk. It was nice outside. But if you wanted to centralize everybody here and you wanted to build a multi-story parking lot, you can. Lots of universities and colleges and hospitals, they've all got them. And certainly if you were constrained from a land perspective, you'd be forced to do it, because I see the other parking lots there are full as well too. So if you're downtown Toronto, you'd have to go up, right? So the projects that we're working on right now is taking space like this and drilling down and creating geothermal as a source of energy to bring that heat into the building to replace some of the fossil fuel heat inside the building. We are, of course, putting solar panels on the top. But even if you put solar panels on the top of even that sort of square footage, just looking outside, it's actually pretty big. Well, let's say you can get a megawatt there. Actually, maybe not. Let's be simple and say you got 500 kilowatts that you could put on the top of your elevated parking lot there. If you were to put an EV charging station at all the stalls in that parking lot, you will 100-fold the energy capacity in that facility, because each of the cars that are coming into the stall can either give or take electrons, and this is where this is going. So when you pull up in your car, depending on, did you charge up at home last night? And what did you charge at? What was the cost? Let's say, for example, right now you would charge at 8 cents, give or take. That's a real number. You come to school or work, depending on what your role, and Scott and Mary say, hey, everybody that's plugged in, we are buyers today at 10 cents. If you want to sell, we will buy, and we'll take whatever electrons you want to give us. Mary and Scott want to do that because the market that day is going to be 12 cents. So they save money, and they're able to curb their peaks and help the whole community here, really. So you're making money, they're saving money, and you've actually got a massive asset here now that will help not only in any sort of expansions, or anything like that on campus. So this exists today. This is not, this two-way give and take of electrons exists today. And right now, I made the joke about everyone filling up at the local gas station. In the future, you're probably only going to go to a local gas station maybe 30% of the time in sort of emergencies or long distances. The majority of the time, you're going to fill up at home overnight. And the other 20 or 25%, however you want to sort of skew that, will be at a destination. So that's either going to be at your place of work, or you're going to the mall, or you're going to somewhere. It's a destination there. So it's the dynamic of your habits and where you're going to charge your main means of transportation will change. And we believe that this will change before autonomous vehicles become popular and prevalent. I think it'll happen. It'll be in very small, isolated sort of scenarios. It won't be as prevalent as people are talking about it, but it's still fun to think about it. So, there's parking lot of the future. That's actually Tokyo, but you can understand the capacity here. That's just enormous. And all the university has done is build a parking lot and put in EV charging stations. You guys are going out and buying electric vehicles because they're getting cheaper, because it's a technology, and they're not expensive to operate. And oh, guess what? I can actually make money and help my campus. So it's you can see how this can come to be. And for the university's perspective, there's not a major investment. You're not building another cogen plant, or you're not covering the property and solar unnecessarily. So some of this got cut off here, but long-winded, but summary here we got, so clearly we've altered our climate. Hopefully everyone in this room realizes that we are in a carbon economy, and that putting a price on carbon is certainly needed and required in order to help sustainability, help these projects. And unfortunately, I'm not expecting us to go to war literally on climate, but hopefully we can change the mind of the decision makers that are in control of deciding whether to build a new parking lot, things like that. All right, that's it.
So O'Brien discussed with us the importance of carbon economy, policy, and technology towards a sustainable future. He discussed how his business has bold goals towards net zero consumption, but these are goals we need to address our global climate crisis. I think we can all say that what you have discussed with us today will be helpful to all of us in our journey as sustainable professionals in the future. I know we have a second guest after this, but on behalf of the Environmental Sustainable Research Program, we would like to thank you and present you this token of our appreciation and gratitude.
Thank you.
So thank you.
We can take some questions before Robert is from the audience.
I didn't do that good of a job. There has to be some questions. Yeah.
So you're talking about electrical cars.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you had an opinion on hybrid.
Hybrid is a good bridge. I think, though, that the cost of electric will outweigh sort of the value of having a hybrid. I drive an electric vehicle. I got the 3, just the little 3, but it's got a over 500, I got the extended battery, over 500 kilometer range. So we're going to go from Toronto and back today and not have to worry about charging. When I go to London or other places, you know where the chargers are. So you just build it it becomes a habit, right? The cool thing about what's happening with Tesla in particular, not to sort of Chrysler's a big client of ours, so we gotta, I do try to drive a Chrysler. I don't show up in the Tesla at Chrysler when I go there. But the most expensive part of the Tesla 3 is the battery. So what they're doing now is they're saying, well, what if we have a 150 or 120 kilometer range battery? You're now chopping this cost down to a third. To buy a vehicle like that for $15,000 is kind of what their goal is. So it's almost you can almost skip to.
That would drive the price down on the other electrical vehicles.
Yeah.
Currently, at that speed, there's still 40,000.
Yeah, exactly. It's amazing what economies of scale does, right? Yeah.
This might be obvious, but I'm just trying to understand the two-way charging thing that you were explaining. So, say you charge up the night before and then you come to school.
Yep.
If you give away some of your electrons, does that then mean grossly your car is not charged? Like, I'm trying to figure that out.
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. So I won't be able to, not everybody will be able to see this, but so Tesla's got an app, there's other apps available as well too, and your respective car would have its own app. When you look at your charging, you can't really see this, but you can set your charging limit. So right now, it's got two different categories. It's got a daily use and then a trip use. So trip, I want as much juice as possible, so I've maxed it. But if I'm just day-to-day around the city, it's not good to totally charge up and drain your battery. It's not good for the battery itself. So they try to say only charge up to about 80% and just sort of, so you can say how much, on the opposite, you can say how much you want to give away as well too. So you can put a threshold there to say, I know I need 80 kilometers to get home. So I'm going to sell from 200 down to 100. I'm willing to give 100 kilometers worth of electrons away today at a price. And you don't even have to go a little bit deeper on this, because the commodity market is pretty volatile. You could say, I'm only a seller today if it's $200 or 20 cents a kilowatt. And the university might say, well, I'm not a buyer right now, but talk to me in 2 hours at the peak and I might be a buyer, depending on what the market is. So it can become quite dynamic, or will become quite dynamic.
So do you have any of those installed, like actually physically installed, that are functioning on more than one car at once?
So what we've got the two-way bidirectional chargers at commercial and college, at a couple of colleges right now. What they're doing is, to your point, there is no stop on Tesla's app. That doesn't exist today. We've developed one that's being tested, but we're doing it for fun with Conestoga College is the one. But in the future, it'll be somebody else will do it, like a charge point or Tesla or Toyota or whoever.
So you see that, yes, the people who supply chargers, you see them coming to the market saying, we'll give you the full outfit, your whole system, we'll do all this for you with the app, with the control, with the...
Yep. It's happening today where they're gapping on the app, if you can believe it. Like we've been the ones sort of encouraging that and connecting those dots. They were just, you can do bidirectional, but we're selling hardware and we don't care after that. So they're changing a little bit as well too, but absolutely they're going to be, they would come, from the university's perspective, if you build the concrete, they'll come in with the charging stations. They may give them to you for free. They may rent them, or they may want to participate in the revenue. So you don't actually have to, it lowers the amount of capital costs that the university would need to use.
Chargers. What's the company that's providing the chargers?
ChargePoint's probably still the biggest one. Flow is another one that's good. They're Canadian. Yeah, they're great. ChargePoint is scatter bombing these things like crazy, so they're on a mission to be the charging unit. But, yeah. Yeah, ladies first, yeah. Okay.
I just wanted to ask, like, the initial 80% charge that I'll do on my car,
Yep.
Will that be from a fossil fuel-based electricity source, or is it also coming from a clean, sustainable source?
So if you talk to the folks at Tesla, they want you to also put a solar panel on your roof at home so that you're charging, and a battery, the Tesla Powerwall, so that you're only drawing from those sources. And that's fantastic in concept. It's more of an investment for the homeowner, so we don't see that happening quite yet. But it very well could be. Thankfully, in Ontario, our grid is pretty green already. So versus Florida or somewhere like that, where the majority of the electrons are still coal, which is crazy. So yeah, there's definitely a bit of a change that needs to happen there. Good question.
Yeah, I was just wondering about, in my research, I think a lot about how we affect change, especially at a large scale. And you mentioned, actions that governments are taking at various levels, actions that companies are taking, and individuals, the climate strikes and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Just wondering at your perspective on where the big change is going to come from. Do you think that it's kind of equal parts government, industry, individuals, or is there one you see as being especially important for kind of moving towards that warlike approach to climate change?
Well, I'll give you an answer from two different angles. So we didn't talk too much about natural gas today. Natural gas prices are pretty cheap. It's also encouraging people to use natural gas. One of the reasons why they're so cheap is because of shale gas and fracking. So that'll continue forever until there's a problem, until somebody dies, until there's an earthquake that's clearly connected to the fracking. Otherwise, they will just continue to do that kind of exploration. So similarly to this, to get into a warlike state, you need to be threatened. I look outside, we're not threatened, unfortunately. And we're in a position of, we've got great resources, great education. We're in a perfect position to help the world. But because we're not seeing the effects on a daily basis, it's that out of sight, out of mind. So the one thing that I think is going to help change it for everybody is technology. And that as it gets cheaper, better, faster, as you're able to make money from buying an asset like this, that's going to change the habits, and it's going to force that kind of change. Governments have sort of opened up some of the regulation and policy. Still needs a ton of work, and even in the province here, the Ford administration, we're still, where are you as it relates to carbon? Are you saying you're not interested in the environment just because you want to be different than who was here last, or where do you really stand on this? And are you going to prevent people from taking action? So I think that there's enough policy and regulation out there that it allows people to make the right changes. But it's unfortunately still comes down to that economic incentive or catalyst to do so. And I think technology will help that happen. Moore's Law, good old Moore's Law.
Okay, well, how about we take just a few minutes of break, and Lisa stretch her legs, and we'll come back at maybe around 10:00. Yeah, you'd like to stay as well, of course.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. So we can meet at 10:00.
Okay, good. Yeah.
That's why I was chasing.
Yeah, I think so. I just left here because I usually walk around a bit.
It was okay, like we handled it really well. And it was just so random here and like it was a little bit tough to read.
Test first, make sure that you're friends, but
Like answer questions at the start, answer questions like that. And then she had to hammer it, like, no. It's like, okay, I turned my chef trying to hurry yesterday.
no problem.
And like I was, and like, and everything she said, she just had a negative connotation to everything she said. And I was like, well, I don't think that's true, like, no matter what I'd say, I think it was just you have perspective. So then I ended up just like kind of that up and things really complicated. So like like if it was like yeah, and then like don't like kind of like and then just watch it my message me after. And then I'm like midway, I was getting a little bit I was just like what's your deal? Basically, I was like, like even when she said that, it was I'm real sad. Oh wow! Yeah, it was pretty dark. We tried to just. Yeah.
And then you look at you
Yeah.
just to say,
I was even like that we handle ourselves. And she was the one. So I got away, but she didn't really like bother me too much. I was just like, just happened. But yeah. It's like anything that's that. She just like I said, and then she's like, you should say that. They're not going to yeah, it was totally like she was not like uplifting or she was the exact opposite. Anything I said, she was just looking. Yeah, and I was trying to get her before she also because
now I have enough information to, yeah.
tried to back this up. I was like, no. And just was me, like, there's no boundary. It's like,
You're gonna come past the
she's like, they are she did so much. Yeah. Like, I didn't even, like, I didn't hear, like, I know, just so that was wrong. Like, you can tell, like, it's just there, and it's like, the second, third one. I feel like, I would have been out there more comfortable because of thinking.
No, okay.
Yeah.
This program for the time. But if you're in the middle Okay. Sure. Yes.
Okay, everyone. Now time for our second speaker, you and me, who is Dr. Robert Steinbauer, and I tried to pronounce his name. He told me to drop it. Okay, so he's going to enlighten us on the topics of ethical decision making and business ethics and sustainability. So Dr. Robert is an associate professor at the Goodman School of Business at Brock University, where he joined in 2014. He holds a PhD in organizational behavior and human resource management from the University of Memphis. He also holds an MBA and a master's in accounting from the University of Arkansas. And he's very well published, and in 2016 and 2018, he has received the Best Paper Award. 2014, he also stood first in the dissertation proposal competition for excellence in ethics. Prior to stepping into academia, Dr. Robert has worked as a consultant at Deloitte in Memphis in the Enterprise Risk Services Department. Professor Steinbauer's research interests are in ethics in entrepreneurship, ethics in artificial intelligence, and mentoring. Thank you for joining us today, Professor, and I would like to welcome him to the warm round of applause.
Thanks much. I appreciate the introduction. It sounds better than it actually is. I do a lot of research in business ethics, ethical decision making, and if you need to know one thing about professors, those who can do, those who can't teach, which means I lie a lot. And that is okay. If you ever have a child, you start lying every single day non-stop. Are you going to bed at 6 o'clock? Of course you're going to bed just after you fall asleep. An everyday lie. But it gets interesting why we lie, why we make ethical decisions, why we make decisions to be ethical or unethical. And today I talk about decision making, the process of it, and how it relates to sustainable choices. But overall, the main goal is to answer one specific question. Why do otherwise good people like me do bad things? For example, buy unsustainable products. I think everybody here goes to the grocery store at least once a month, I would argue, probably once a week. And how often do you actually think about, you know, today I'm going to buy fair trade chocolate. I buy the chocolates on sale usually. Does this make you a better person? The answer is no, but sometimes we just think a little bit in different ways. And I try to explain that process. But before we go into this whole thing, I'm going to have a big segment or league view into a different topic, Kiva. For those who don't know, Kiva is a micro-lending organization where people from all over the world, even in the States, but mostly from developing countries, can ask for microloans. Sometimes it's $100, sometimes it's $1,000, maybe it's a bigger project for $5,000. And anybody in the world can provide them with money. Microloans, $25, $50, and those little loans can go a long way. If you try to rebuild a school, and you need $5,000 in Pakistan, for example, just like Ali does, he needs $1,625 US to improve the school that he's running. It is a low-cost school in the middle of Pakistan to help poor children. So he is doing something good, and today you have the option to help him. Again, Ali needs to he needs the school that he runs its urgent repair and maintenance. So keep Ali in mind during my talk, because I want you truly to emphasize with him that you have the option today to help him, not with money, but with your brain. And that gets very interesting. That brings us to the first test. I have prepared a very quick math example. I'm professors, I like exams the most. Each of you gets one, don't flip it over quite yet, just hand out two back. You can't really cheat because there are altering patterns, but the goal is to, in a matrix like this, so there's 20 matrices on your piece of paper, and you need to find two numbers that add up to 10. Very, very simple. It's actually not that simple. Anybody can find two numbers on this spreadsheet that add up to 10? Anybody got it? 4.99. Yes. So there's one pair that adds up to 10. 4.99, 5.41. Together they are solid 10. And the goal is to not cheat and look ahead right now. That sounds like you. That's okay. We want to wait that everybody has the same time. Again, you have 5 minutes to find as many, so per matrix as one here. But you have 5 minutes to solve as many matrices as possible. Do you need pens? I got pens for those. Go through this. Yeah. Anybody needs a pen? Okay, is everybody ready? I know some already started, so let's just. Let's go. 5 minutes. Just go. So 1 minute left. All right. That's it. All right. So now on the bottom there's a score. Put in your score and make sure you remember that score. For some it's very easy, for some it's very difficult. The score doesn't matter. Well, it matters because for each matrix that you solve, I will donate today, well, I'm going to loan 50 cents to Ali. And if you happen to have on average more than, if the whole group on average has more than 10 solved matrices, I'm going to put an extra $50. So make sure you put the number down, flip it over. No name, there should not be a name or anything on it, it's all anonymous. All right, now put them all to the end, please. So one person gets them. Oops, sorry. And you can go and start shredding. I know it's important we shred those results. Thank you. Just go straight and shred it.
With the numbers on the back.
Doesn't matter, just straight and shred it.
That's not fair.
All right. So now you're like, why did I do that? Yeah. I might be playing. Yeah, it's a pretty old shredder. Sorry about that. Okay, so as I said, for each matrix that you've solved, I will donate 50 cents, and I want you to know that this money goes straight to Ali, who can use that money. So on a piece of paper, put some in the middle, write down the number of matrices that you solved. Any of the papers, you know that I have no way of checking. But you need to make a decision now. Do you help Ali? Or the more matrices you solve, the better is Ali. So write down the number of how many matrices you solved.
What was the downside of lying?
Why would you lie?
Because we're not getting one.
No. I mean, again, there's no way for me to check and shred it. It's write down a number, any number you feel. If you think 20 is the number, he should get $10. That's the number. Well,
Do you want the numbers on one per, on one paper? Okay.
One paper is going to be, you can summarize it up as too many pieces of paper. It's any random piece of paper. I'll have an associate in the end summarize or make a number out of it.
Write your number.
Yes. But that's an interesting exercise. Because as we said, there's absolutely no downside of lying right now. It's actually good if you lie, I would argue. Because you're going to help others. And if you think 10 people, we have $10 maximum for 50, 20 people, that's at least a good towards a good cause. And while I don't drive an electric car yet, I'm still driving a nice car. So it's not, I'm not suffering too much. Without that. And if you put on if you solve 20 matrices, then I'm going to loan $10 to Ali.
Karen says she's having flashbacks to grade 6.
Being in grade 6.
So I'll do this with my students, whether it's undergrad, I do this with my undergrad students, my MBA students, with my international MBA students. I can tell you that the undergrad students feel the most generous. They really want to help, versus MBA students don't want to help as much. They try to stick to moral values or whatever they call it, but they don't like giving money away. The national MBA is somewhere in the middle. But the question becomes, why is it so hard suddenly to make a decision? Is lying right? No. But sometimes we are encouraged to lie, whether it's through outside sources, whether it's through our own intentions. There's reasons. The reason I know how much my students lie, because I lie too a lot. As I mentioned before, I don't lie to my son. I also lie to a lot of people. And this shredder is, of course, my own shredder. And I'm going to figure this out later. But we're going to see the results, actually. We don't know who said what, but I'm going to have my associate in the end go through really quick and summarize the number of matrices solved. I'm a researcher, I want to see the discrepancy, right? I want to know whether my incentives that I provide to others help them to violate social norms. Why do you lie? Why do you cheat? I really make it, I encourage people to cheat. But still, at some point, you have to ask yourself, should I lie or should I not lie? Again, soon we know how this group of people does. I expect to be, maybe a very small discrepancy, but we'll find out. But the reason or the way humans make decisions based on ethics, or the way they assess the moral intensity of a situation, is with only 6 simple aspects. And I try to manipulate every single of those aspects in favor of you cheating. So you should not feel bad if you didn't tell the truth. Number 1, I will truly never know. And number 2, I actually truly encourage negative consequences. Of course, you're not going to go outside and kill anyone. But I drive a nice car, I'm not going to be hurt. I told you there's no consequence if I spend a little bit of money. On the other hand, the negative consequences for Ali are big. There's people, not just Ali that's been helped, but also children that are being helped. So that's how I manipulated this variable. Social consensus. You may not know yet, but some of you had an easier matrix to solve. So if there is a 20, there might be a couple of people who truly were able to make a 20, because they only had 1 decimal point instead of 2 decimal points. So then when you see that others write down 20, and you know it's impossible, then I really, as researcher at Duke University, used this very similar test, and found that on average you solve 5, maybe 6, somewhere between 5 and 6 amongst thousands of people. If somebody writes down 20, or 2 or 3 people write down 20, they are going to lie. And if they are lying, there's no consensus there. If everybody does it, it's okay again. So the magnitude of the more intensity is lower. Then you have the probability of effect. I'm gonna truly donate the money of however many matrices have been solved today. This person will be helped based on the actual matrices. On the other hand, there's a 0 chance of me catching it. There's no name on it. You thought it was shredded. Why would I be able to associate your name with the lie? The maximum concentration of the effect, that was a trick because you're hurting one person to help a lot of people, so it's a high concentration, but I tried to reduce it already because there's no consequences anyways. Temporal immediacy, if things happen right now, then they're more important to you, versus if they're far out. That's one of the problems we face with climate emergency. Right now, we don't feel it, and what's far away, we don't care as much. And of course, proximity. Not necessarily just spatial distance, but also social distance. I try to make sure that you know that Ali is a good person, that he's helping others, to create this proximity, so you feel okay with helping him. Versus I'm just a professor, you may not feel as close to me anyways. So those are ways individuals assess the moral intensity of an act. But even so, if you think something is truly has a big impact, it's very important to act right now, there's still a chance you lie, or that you act unethically. And that's where moral disengagement comes into place. So there's two variables that play together. The first one, we assess their situation, and then when we make a decision whether to lie or not to lie, whether to buy a sustainable product or not buy a sustainable product, then we have to convince ourselves that the act is okay. That's when the ultimate question was, how can otherwise good people make bad decisions? When you bought your Model 3, how do you feel? Right? It's not just, it's a sustainable, it's fast, yeah, but it is sustainable, it makes you feel good. When you act according to your moral virtues, moral values, you feel good about yourself. You want to buy a sustainable car, you buy a sustainable car, you feel good. If you don't have the money, you buy a hybrid. I don't think anybody, or not many people in this world buy a Prius hybrid because they want to have a status of fast, fancy car. They buy this car because they want to feel good about themselves. They want to contribute as much as they can. There's clothing lines out there, Tom's shoes. You pay a little bit more to get a product that's very comfortable, but at the same time, it makes you feel good. So acting according to your own moral values makes you feel good. Violating your moral values makes you feel bad. But then moral justification. If we can convince ourselves that it's okay in this specific situation to act that way, so that our moral standards do not apply in that very act, then we can engage in it. Hence, this exercise, where we all know that lying is wrong. Yes, I manipulated this, but at the end of the day, it comes down lying, not lying. Lying, well, I would say it comes down to lying or helping. We all know that lying is wrong. Did anybody feel bad? Well, I shouldn't say because you should disclose whether you lied or not. So that's not. Usually, my students don't feel bad about lying at all, especially undergrad students, because they help. Ventura argued there is 8 moral disengagement strategies that help us to convince ourselves that we don't have to apply our moral standards. So the first is moral justification, which is sort of like an umbrella term. As long as I can think that it's socially acceptable in this situation to violate my personal standards, I'm okay. So that's kind of the umbrella term. But then we go more in more detail. Euphemistic labeling. In this case, you didn't really cheat, you helped. By calling the act differently, it makes you feel better about yourself, which is really easier. Because let's face it, if I, at the beginning of this lecture, told you, who is going to steal, let's say, $10 from me today? Probably nobody would have said so. But if I would ask you, who is willing to help Ali today? A lot of people would have said yes. So just calling the same act differently has a big impact. Advantageous comparison talks about if I can compare my act to somebody else's, who is worse. So when you see the 20 on there, and you're like, you know what? The person next to me wrote 20 down, and I only write 10 down, even though I sold 5. He's the really bad person because he is truly a liar. I'm just, I didn't live up to my true potential right now. But on a good day, I would solve 10. Then, of course, displacement of responsibility is a big one here. Because you know that I, as a professor, should hold you accountable. I should check, I should have your name on it, I should collect, I should verify it. So if I truly wanted for you to tell the truth, it would have been me who has put certain controls in place, which didn't happen. So kind of, I am responsible for you to lie anyways, because otherwise there will be controls. We have diffusion of responsibility. If a lot of people do the same thing, it's okay. Disregarding the consequences. I already told you I drive a nice car. I couldn't care less about the $10 that you may or may steal from me. Dehumanization is probably not as important here. It comes down to when you, in a war, and you have to kill the enemy, you combine euphemistic labeling with dehumanization, where you can acknowledge human properties to the person that you hurt, and attribution of blame. The person that you actually steal from, the person that you do something, is responsible for the act. Similar in this case as displacement responsibility. But those are the only 8 reasons that Bandura, or my research argues, are responsible for people to disengage from the moral standards. So do we have a total summary? Yep. How many did we actually solve? Did the group actually solve?
They actually solved 123.
123, that's on average how many?
Average of 25. Average of 4.9.
Which is absolutely normal. So 123 solved, and how many do you have claimed?
142.
So not too bad. That's
Average from 4.9 to 6.4.
Yeah, that's like a 10-20% increase of your abilities.
Hey, note to self, GPD. That's great intel for me.
Yeah, if you ever have a chance during this class, I would make sure you monitor it.
Don't be names.
Is there anybody who would like to disclose whether they considered one of those moral disengagement strategies? Well, let's do it differently. Let's go to the next slide. Ethical decision-making and sustainability. This whole exercise was great to show that many people in this room, to some extent, will overestimate or will fudge reality just a little bit. By 2, 4, 6, not that big of a difference. But now that we know that we have the ability to do so, and that, don't forget, those aspects, how we assess moral intensity, is not necessarily dictated by yourself, but by the environment. Because I try to manipulate you. How often do you go to a grocery store and think about the consequences of your actions? Any product that you last bought that you knew was sustainable? We're a sustainable group here, so there should be a lot of hands up. And what? Yes?
So for my Halloween costume, I needed hairspray.
Okay.
And I spent about 20 minutes staring at the hairspray in the aisle, wondering what is the most sustainable option that I can buy. I bought one that isn't an aerosol can, but it took me 20 minutes to get there.
All right. 20 minutes time spent.
Yes.
Do you think that anybody would have looked at you and said, wow, she really hurts the environment if you just go and buy one? The social consensus, nobody. There is no benefit for you besides the good feel effect at this point. Any others?
It's not really a product that I buy, but I refuse to use the plastic bags for produce.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm actually shocked about how many odd looks I get when I'm putting them in my basket.
Okay.
I don't know if I'm just assuming they're giving me weird looks, but people will always seem to be staring into my cart with my produce just everywhere.
Yeah, which is interesting. That's the negative, the other opposite. You would suspect that people who take care of the environment at least get some benefit from it, versus others who don't care don't get any negative benefits. But yes, there's also those reusable little plastic bags for the produce available that my loving wife has.
I thought I'm the avant-garde student.
No. She's my co-author and also my wife. That's why she was picked too. To us. Any other examples of products that you may don't care about or that you haven't looked for? Well, they have a sustainable impact. That's tricky. Nobody goes shopping anymore?
No, I feel like I do this a lot at grocery stores, so I also try to use my reusable produce bags. But like this week, cauliflower, it was all wrapped again in plastic, I guess because of where it's traveling from. So you're saying and being like, I want to make this thing with cauliflower, but do I buy it or not? And I did, but I feel a little guilty about it. Right?
But again, you didn't have another option.
But no, I could have went to another store and I didn't do that.
But if you drive a car again.
Yeah, that's true.
So again, there's lots of reasons why.
Yeah.
But on a daily basis, I would argue that more disengagement is a very strong process. And my students always tell me, so now that we know how to disengage, we can live happy. Which is not true. The idea behind learning about more disengagement is that once you're aware that those strategies exist, you can track them. You can identify which one you actually use the most and do something about it. Because at the end of the day, more disengagement does not make the decision right. It just helps you justify it to yourself. That means if you don't use more disengagement, you should be a happy person. Using it just means you mask your own conduct so that you believe yourself to be a happy person. But why does it even matter at this point? Well, Ryan said a few things. People have good intentions, but it's oftentimes the price that drives them away. That people are still in denial. Well, they are in denial because they can rationalize it. And it's up to us to make the right decision. Well, yes, it is up to us to make the right decision, but as long as we just live in a day, as long as we are able to disengage, we are in a downward spiral, because once you're used to conduct, it's easy to go a little further. Not many people will put 20 on because it's a big discrepancy from the actual number. But if you put 4, make it 5, that helps a little bit, make it 6 helps a little bit. If I do this experiment every single week, at some point we are every at 20 because there's no consequences and so on. But the same thing happens with purchase decisions. If you don't start caring at some point, it will get worse and worse. As students, oftentimes look for the cheapest product, and that's understandable. But you condition yourself to buy the cheapest product. And well, now that you know that, let's say a pound of apple is supposed to cost 99 cents at no frills, why would you spend $3, $4 for an organic apple? It worked for you for the last 3 years. It's very difficult to change it. And that's where schemas and scripts come into place. Schemas are cognitive frameworks that are based on past decisions. Meaning that more often you do something, the more easy it becomes. Imagine the first time you drove a car. That's an extremely difficult thing to do. You have to watch out for, well, gas and brake, maybe a clutch, a lot of things in the surrounding, but over time it gets easier and easier. And the same is true for conduct, any conduct. The first time you make your way to Brock University on a bus, you have a bus schedule ready, you know which, you have to look at which intersection you have to take the bus, which side you have to go to, what time the bus leaves. After 2 or 3 years, you don't need all this anymore because it's automated. And that's extremely dangerous. In the 70s, again, a slightly different example, Ford had to develop a new car. And the reason was because the gas prices were skyrocketing, and Japanese cars came in with, they were fuel efficient and they were cheap. They were small, and Ford cars were big, chunky cars. So within half the production time, or the usual production time, we had to make or develop a car that is less than 2,000 pounds and costs less than $2,000. And during that initial development, they ran a test that was recommended but not required by the Highway Safety Commission. And they realized that any rear-end collision at more than 50 kilometers an hour would make the rear axle push into the gas tank, and there was a pretty high chance for the car to burst in flames. background story here. That is, by the way, the fourth paper here. And the question became, what decision should we make? Should we change the $11 part, the plate that goes between the rear axle and the gas tank, to prevent the fire from happening, or should we save $11 per car? And we know the calculation now because there was an official mail, the office mail that was disclosed. So this is the actual calculation here. Cost of installing the part, 137 million. Cost of not installing the part, it was estimated that 180 people dying. At the time, a death by the government was estimated to cost about $20,000. 180 people are seriously injured, and $67,000 in a bunch of vehicles. But the overall cost of not installing the $11 part was less than $50 million. So what are we going to do? Who here would like to install that part today? Fired. I'm teaching business ethics. At the end of the day, it's a business decision. If you tell your CEO, would you like, based on the official calculation, are you going to install the $11 part? Yes? As your stockholder, as a person who wants to maximize my profit. And it sounds counterintuitive because nowadays, the numbers might be different now, or are definitely different because of social media and whatnot. But at that time, this was the calculation. And if you're in this position, you would have to struggle, I think. I think if you know that your decision kills likely 180 people, and another 180 people being seriously injured, there's families, there's children, that should bother you. That should, even regardless of what decision you take, the decision itself, to make a decision, should bother you. And Dennis Goya, who wrote the article about the Ford Pinto, was at the time the quality production manager. So he actually made the decision for Ford. He then became a professor. And the one thing that he mentioned is that's extremely important. At the time when he made this decision, it was just a regular decision for him. He didn't care. He brought it up once as well. There's 180 people dying, but he didn't feel bad about it anymore. He didn't lose any sleep about it, and it was just a business decision. And if a person can make this as a business decision, so you know what, 180 people dying, I don't lose any sleep anymore, how can you expect anybody to think about what hairspray to use? Whether the broccoli is wrapped in plastic. The average person is able to make decisions that are far more important without realizing consequences. And he talked about schemas and scripts. It didn't start out like this. It started out with, maybe there was a couple of decisions similar to this at the beginning. He lost sleep over it, but he knew what decision to take. And over time, it got easier and easier. And again, from a numbers perspective, it's a clear decision. It costs you less, so you have to take it. But extremely important for you to realize is just because you do something over and over again, it doesn't make it right. More disengagement, it's the same process. The more often you use a strategy, the easier it becomes. And it's very difficult to break the circle because of the schemes and scripts that are in place. Today, if you step into the bus, you don't have to think anymore. But if the bus is not there anymore, suddenly you have to think. So it's important to analyze, this will be my next slide, to stop engaging in unstable products, or I would call it, generally speaking, an unethical decision making. You need to create awareness first. See what you actually do on a daily basis that has an impact. And that's probably one of the most important parts, because once you know what you do, well, you just have to hold yourself accountable and say, you know what, I'll do this, I use my plastic bags for the groceries, but every time I use it, I'm going to donate $1. And it's going to bother me because it's cheaper for me to just buy the reusable ones and not donate $1. And of course, highlight the consequences. Make sure you realize that your actions have consequences. It's not, yes, it sounds like very simple to save a plastic bag. But if I think 2020, we have no more single-use plastics in Canada, well, that means we should all start doing this now, because there are severe consequences. I think that is it from my presentation. And I would like to formally apply for lying to you. Yes.
picking up that sort of, like activity you ran through with us.
Mhm.
And I guess I'm trying to figure out, at what point is it disengagement from your morals, and at what point is it having to choose between two moral standards? So like, you know, you value honesty, but you also value helping people. So at that point, is it different to say, okay, I'm just deciding to go after this moral instead, or is that still sort of a moral disengagement from the honesty value?
It's a very good question that there is an answer to it. The reason I'm saying this is, and I tried to write papers about it, moral disengagement focuses solely on what is your moral standard. Maybe your moral standard is not even there, then you don't even have to disengage. And we don't have any assessment tool to see what are your moral standards. That's why I was very happy to say, when you mentioned lying, there's a consequence for lying. In this specific exam, we knew it was about lying, and yes, there is a conflicting value. But lying is sort of a universal accepted one, that hurts versus helping Ali. There's a struggle. Yes, again, there is no true answer to this, because if it were a dilemma, it would be very simple. If I say the more you write down, the faster I'm gonna drive home, why would you lie? So unless there is a dilemma where there's two conflicting moral imperatives at stake, there wouldn't be that struggle. Good question. Yes.
Gary Bickering from Brock. Thank you. I really enjoyed your talk. I'm going to be a devil's advocate as usual and ask you a loaded question. You've mentioned your class a lot, your classes, which I'm assuming are business students and not familiar with literature. Let's assume it's also largely business students. I've just finished reading the umpteenth paper written that has concluded that business students have much higher, between moderate to much higher rates of sociopathy, lower empathy for others, and other stuff that one could be cynical and say, well, they're different, they're evil, they're not normal human beings. That being the case, if it is true, I guess the question is how much of the mechanisms behind moral disengagement that you've outlined would actually hold for the rest of the population that may have those different personality profiles.
So Neda Rieli is out of Duke, and he is an economist, actually. Behaviour economist. And he does, yes, I do it with business students, and he does it with the general population. And this test has been used by thousands of his participants. And it's always the same. People don't usually cheat by a lot, but cheat by a little. That 10 to 20% is the thing that we can easily justify to ourselves usually. So yes, I fully agree. Business students are worse. I'm not quite sure if it's a self-selection process, that if you are high on sociopathic traits, you go into business school, or whether business school causes traits. The debate is still out there, and it's a valid debate. Because if we could prove that at the beginning of the first semester everybody is equal, but the business students develop those traits, or not traits in that sense, but trait states, then we would have to change business schools. If you know there's a self-selection bias, that those who are more likely to engage in sociopathic behavior join business schools, then we probably have to do some of more ethics training.
And I guess as a small follow-up, I really laughed at and enjoyed your example when you outlined those moral disengagement mechanisms, the white lies we tell ourselves, not do the right thing. And I think you said that your student said to you, that's great, now I know what to do to make myself feel better about, in this case, not engaging in sustainable behaviour. Would you care to speculate, in the big picture, are we doing the world a disservice by educating them on this sort of stuff? Because are we not simply providing ammunition for those with anti-environmental values, for instance, to manipulate their own thinking or society at large to not do the right thing?
Personally, I would argue against that. I think that once we do it either way, whether I teach or not, but once you know that you're doing it, you can create awareness. And I believe there's, again, even though I teach business ethics, I don't think I'm going to change somebody's moral standards. If they are unethical people, they're not gonna take my classes, how they come out and donate all their belongings. But I can create awareness, and I can show them that there are organizations out there that don't require you to disengage. And a lot of my teaching is about examples, leadership. When you go to an environment, let's say Enron, right? As a former accountant, Enron was a big deal, but the climate at Enron was apparently to the point where you knew after a couple, they were chosen by the companies that had some questionable accounting practices. So if you work for them, you're exposed to those. And again, schemas and strengths, the longer you're exposed to some unethical behavior, the more likely you adapt to them. By demonstrating or bringing examples where it's clear that those organizations care about ethics, showing them, you know what, there are organizations out there that do the right thing. That means that when they end up in one organization that does not the right thing, they at least know this is not how it's supposed to be. So I'm still advocating and teaching ethics and giving them the theories that they know and can identify that other people too. Because moral disengagement can also be detected when you talk to somebody, if they justify their actions. I didn't buy my electric car because I wasn't quite sure of the resale value in 5 years, even though I really care about the environment. Either you don't care about the environment or you just disengaged yourself from it, from your own moral standards. But I think it's a good tool to have. It can be abused, absolutely. Any other questions? Yes?
So I'm interested in CSR messaging, so I'm just wondering what your opinion is on corporations having an influence on the awareness part.
Okay. I'll use another example with chocolates. There is endangered species chocolates. For those who know, they donate 10% of their, I would say revenue, but it might just be profits, to endangered species in this world. In the packaging already, you see where your money goes to, of course, fair trade, vegan, non-GMO, and all that. As long as you know your customers, so the customer has to care about the cause. As long as the pricing is still fair, and what are there? There's 7 reasons I teach in my class. Know your customers, make sure they know that their purchase decision can have an impact. By showing you buy this product, there will be a donation made and it can help this endangered species. Yes, I believe you can empower the customers. As long as they feel they can have an impact, you should absolutely do it as much as possible. If you just use it as window dressing, those who care will see through it, and those who don't care, so it's meaningless. But I can give you an article on that one too, specifically.
That'd be great. Thanks.
I'll put it down to double check on that.
Sure.
I think 99% of CSR is window dressing.
I would say
Because
one
it's
of
not
the-
about messaging, it's about what to do.
It has to be both. You have to communicate your efforts, especially for those customers who care. If you don't communicate your efforts, then it's nice, it's still good, but you don't attract customers that actually care. And the goal should be to educate customers so that they can then have an informed purchase decision. Yes, there's 80% of customers who probably don't care. There's a lot of people who buy their broccoli, cauliflower, without feeling bad about it. But those who care, you should still be able to address. Okay? Good. Yes?
I just wanted to know, how does a consumer know that he's buying an unsustainable product? We don't have it normally labeled this as an unsustainable product. There's not an aisle that states this is an unsustainable product.
Actually, if you go to, let's say, Sears or to a Sobeys, there will be the organic aisle that screams, I'm sustainable. And then there's the regular aisle that says, I'm okay too. So if you care about it, you will find ways. Does the great majority, or do most people care? Not as much as they should. I think if you go to Europe, you go to a regular grocery store, you find organic products pretty much on par priced with regular products. So you buy whatever you prefer, not necessarily based on price. And I'm from Austria, so it's kind of, sort of I spent quite some time there. It's really, you go to even a discount grocery store, and most of the products are organic because the consumer cares, and then it's easy. Yes, here you have to do your research. If you go to No Frills, it'll be tricky, But by selecting the grocery store you go to already shapes the decision on the purchase in the end. Yes.
Just to chime in on that, I teach an upper year undergraduate course in sustainability, and two of the classmates are here, and I'm pretty sure we discussed last year in class, you know the way that we now recognize that health is critical and we label calories on products? The class was talking about the potential of adding carbon miles to products to demonstrate exactly the lack of information about it. If we would recognize it at a national scale that carbon is serious, so that consumers, we would remove that barrier to making a more informed decision. I think it's quite probably idealistic, but it was an interesting conversation.
It's not idealistic. I just was in Austria 2 weeks ago, and I went to Aldi, which is one of the cheapest groceries you can possibly go to. And they had fair trade, organic, zero carbon footprint chocolate, which is at a discount grocery store. And they label it zero carbon footprint. So again, it is possible. I think consumers would purchase it, those who care. But yes, I think that's the first one here, and then, yeah.
So are there any gender-based differences in how people engage in our decision-making?
So they are really into the question of statistics. Yes, there are. And the difference is that only women raise this question. And I really feel, he has TED Talks about it, and that was one of the first questions came up. Behavior-wise, there's a difference, but for some reason, women raise this question more often now. Again, not my words, they're not really his words. Maybe, I think we have more time.
Maybe, okay, I was just going to add something to what you were talking about with consumer products. I was just going to mention is like outside of grocery stores, also again, clothing is another thing that's really part of the environment, and also has a lack of information as to where they're coming from, where it's informed, what the packaging processes is. In my undergrad, I worked in a clothing store for 5 years, and the amount of plastic and packaging we went through was just absolutely horrible, and it's really changed my perspective on like where I'm getting my clothes from, not just secondhand, but materials. Research is really important, like just to like gain knowledge about what you're buying, like don't just buy things because it's convenient, but really put in that extra effort to like, figure out what you're buying.
Yeah, I have purpose, not just because it's cheap. All right, thank you so much.
Yeah, just a quick summary of what we learned today. The role moral disengagement plays when consumer make decisions to purchase unsustainable products, the role of ethical leadership and business ethics, and decision making in the context of business ethics and sustainable purchasing. And I would like to present you on behalf of the ESRC and the SAS program a token of our gratitude and appreciation. Thank you.